Hi everyone, my name is Rémi Casabé. I'm associate professor in the University of Lyon. And in this short video, I will present a very brief introduction to Bitcoin. So what is Bitcoin and some key elements to help you understand. So I have to stress from the beginning that this is my vision of Bitcoin. I'm a computer scientist or data scientist, network scientist, but I'm not an economist, for instance. So this is a particular perspective on Bitcoin. And again, it's just a very brief introduction. So some elements of history. Most of you have already known of Bitcoin, that it was created by someone called Satoshi Nakamoto, which is actually either a person or a group of persons, we don't really know. And this was in 2009. But what many people are not aware is that actually Bitcoin is something which is evolving quite quickly, actually. There are new versions very often. And the way this is handled is not by Satoshi Nakamoto anymore, but by a small group of individuals, around maybe 5, 10, depends on the time. And they basically have the access on a GitHub repository where there is the code of the core version of Bitcoin. And they accept proposal of modification made by the community. And so the protocol of Bitcoin is evolving all the time to become more efficient, faster, more secure, more anonymous, and so on and so forth. So what is Bitcoin? It's first a cryptocurrency, but saying this is very generic. More generally, it's a decentralized digital currency. So it means that you can send an amount of monies to other people or to companies using only electronic means. And there is no central authority. So that's really a particularity of these cryptocurrencies. There is no central bank. There is no state that guarantees what's going on. It's just some cryptographic means that guarantee that no one will be cheating in the process. So no one can create new coins, so fake money that they can use. And no one, in theory, can steal money from you unless they get your password and information allowing you to access your wallet. So yeah, it's only cryptographic means allowing to guarantee what's going on. So you might wonder, why is it interesting to still talk about Bitcoin? Bitcoin is relatively old, and you have probably heard about new currencies, new cryptocurrencies that have been created after Bitcoin, like Ethereum or Ripple and so on and so forth. But as you can see on this plot, actually Bitcoin is still by far the most used cryptocurrency. So here it's in terms of market capitalization. So the total number of money which is which can be used by people, and you can see that until 2017, maybe Bitcoin was nearly at 100%. So all the cryptocurrencies. Bitcoin was basically the only important cryptocurrency. And then in the years 2018, for instance, new currencies became nearly as important as Bitcoin, like, for instance, the Ethereum. But we can see that since that time, actually, Bitcoin became more and more important again. And nowadays, so about 65% of all the cryptocurrencies amount in activity in the world are composed of Bitcoin. So Bitcoin is still a major player in the cryptocurrency market. So let's give some numbers about Bitcoin. So Bitcoin, the market capitalization is around 300 billion. So this will correspond to the market capitalization of huge companies like Samsung, Intel, or MasterCard. There are more than 500,000 transactions per day in Bitcoin. The transaction fee of a transaction, the median one is less than $1. The total value sent per day amounts to about $1 billion. And the trading volume per day is about 0.5 to 5 billion, so it's much harder to know. So these are two different things, of course. The total value sent by day is what is written in the blockchain, so we are talking about real exchange, while the trading volume is something which is happening at exchange, so kind of banks that actually do not really trade these Bitcoins. But I will say a few words more about that later. And finally, the median transaction value in Bitcoin is of an amount which corresponds to about $500. So when you have heard about Bitcoin, you probably heard about the blockchain. So what is this blockchain? I won't go into the detail of the protocol or how it's working, on how is it secured, but just to give you an idea of what is inside. Actually, the point of the blockchain is just to store all the transactions which are made, and that's all. So it's a digital ledger. Technically, it's like a sequential database, like a chain, in which you can add new transaction at the end of the chain. And the important thing is that you cannot modify what is in the previous transactions. So when something is written in this chain, it's impossible to remove it, because otherwise you will have to remove all the other links in the chain. So another very important point is that anyone can read everything in this chain. So the chain is storing the list of all transactions, and everyone can go and check and read what is in these transactions. And well, adding a new element to this chain requires to solve a cryptographic problem. So that's why it's a cryptographic solution. And I will say a few words about that later. It's the famous miners that solve these cryptographic problems. So here you have an example of one transaction, what is stored in the blockchain. So you can actually go and read this transaction per transaction in the blockchain. What is in a transaction? Well, you have a unique identifier of this transaction. You have the address of the person who is sending the Bitcoins. So this will correspond to your bank numbers, for instance. Your unique number of your bank account, and you have the bank account that received the amount sent. So who this corresponds to who is receiving. So here you see that two different people are actually receiving some amounts, and you have the sum in input here and the sum in output. So this plus the transaction fee correspond to what is in input, obviously. So you also have this information, what is the transaction fee. And finally, you have the time of the transaction. So you can see that you have all the information about this transaction that can help you to interpret it. So one question you can ask now is, but anyone can go to the blockchain and read all the transactions in it. So does it mean that there is no anonymity? Because Bitcoin is famous for money laundering and people maybe trying to buy illegal products on it. So certainly there is a trick that makes you not able to track what I'm doing on Bitcoin. Well, so anyone can see all the transactions. So we can study in details all the aggregated statistic. That is true. So how many transactions per day? What are the amounts, average amount of transaction, and these kind of things. But we cannot necessarily track what individuals are doing. Why? For two reasons. So the first one is that actually there is a pseudonymity, which means that people do not use their names, or they don't have to give their identity. They can just create an address, and this address is just a sequence of numbers. And you can see a transaction between sequence of numbers and other sequences of numbers, but you don't know who are the sequence of numbers. So that's the first point. But you can imagine that for some of these sequence of numbers, these Bitcoin addresses, we could find to whom they correspond to. So we could try to break this pseudonymity. So the creators of Bitcoin, they were aware of that, of course, and so they introduced a system to avoid this problem, which is that actually anyone can create as many addresses as they want. So I can create, for instance, a new transaction, a new address every time I make a new transaction. So you cannot just know my address and track this address. But for some reasons, I cannot go into details. I don't have the time here, and it's not the point. You can solve with algorithmic solutions the problem of finding all the addresses corresponding to a particular users. So it doesn't work perfectly, but still it works quite well, especially for big users, for companies, big companies. So you can quite easily track the activity of these big companies or big users, major actors on the network. But you cannot do it probably for the smaller individuals. Some elements about markets. So you might wonder, for instance, where does the cost of Bitcoin, the value of Bitcoin, where does it comes from? So we know that one Bitcoin is worth, for example, $10,000. So where does this comes from? Well, actually, it's just like for any other currency. There are some exchange markets in which traders, people like you and me, for instance, we can buy bitcoins against euros or dollars, and we can also sell our bitcoins. And this is a market like any other. And the result is that if people want to buy, more and more people want to buy bitcoins, then the price of the bitcoin will increase. So this is how the bitcoin value is fixed. And there is another market, which is also interesting to study, is the one of the transaction fees. So you probably heard about miners, that people who have actually computers that make computation, trying to solve cryptographic problems to include new transaction in the blockchain. So they are the people who make the blockchain works actually. So they are here to give their computational power to make the system works. And they are paid to do that. They are paid by new coins that are created. New bitcoins are created, and they receive these new bitcoins for what they are doing. And also, they are also paid by transaction fees. And actually, this transaction fee, they are decided by the person who creates transactions. So when I do a transaction, I decide how much fees I want to give to the person who will integrate this transaction in the blockchain. And so if I give a high fee, then my transaction will have a high priority and people will want to integrate it first in the blockchain. And if I don't give any fee, then there is a good chance that no one will ever integrate it because they will not receive anything for this work. So again, that's a market. If and the price of the transaction fee is negotiated this way between people proposing transactions and people accepting to do some work to integrate this transaction in the blockchain. So an interesting question is what are these Bitcoin transactions? So we can see in the blockchain what is all the transactions which are in it. So this address have sent some amount to this address, but what is it? What is this transaction? Is it, for instance, so some of them are clearly results of mining. So for instance, newly created Bitcoins or fees. Some are probably exchange between users. So maybe someone here wants to send me some Bitcoins for this presentation. Well, you can do it. Some are users buying services or products. So there are companies that accept Bitcoins, especially for services. Or for instance, I want to sell you a software, or you can also make donations maybe to some non-profit organization, for instance. So these are possibilities. There is also obviously trading, but the trading, when you exchange Bitcoins against dollars, they are not usually included directly in the blockchain. You cannot see them in the blockchain because this is actually handled by kind of banks, which are exchange platforms, and they do this exchange from users to users, well, from customer to customer without going through the blockchain. There are other things like gamblings or exchange between these kind of big banks that exist in Bitcoin, and yeah, so there are many things happening, but we don't really know actually what is going on because it's a difficult problem to know between whom and whom are these transactions made. So the detail is not known yet. So today you will have several presentations by researchers of different scientific fields. They won't all be exactly about Bitcoin, but we will more talk about topics related to Bitcoins and cryptocurrencies. So some will be about new categories of cryptocurrencies, other will be about other types of digital currencies. And I hope that you will enjoy these presentations.